And then there's the story in today's New York Daily News saying that Parcells was told by scouts in his room, or a specific scout in his draft room in 2000, when they were on the clock, 179th overall, to take Tom Brady, and he didn't. The man who reports that story joins me now live on the phone on the Rich Eisen Show from Gillette Stadium, Gary Myers. How are you, Gary?
I'm doing great, Rich. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. So way to rub salt in the wounds here for the Jet fans already raw over a 1-5 start, Gary. I don't want to shoot the messenger here, but good Lord.
You know, the story came with a warning. You know, if you're a Jets fan, you know, read with caution because this one's going to hurt. But I spoke to somebody recently who was in the Jets draft room in 2000, and, you know, that was the year the Jets had 4 number 1 picks, which was a record, and 2 of them came in the Keyshawn Johnson trade. And the third of the 4 Parcells used on Chad Pennington. So it's not the column I wrote isn't criticizing the Jets at all because, you know, Tom Brady was the 199th player picked. And if the Patriots thought he was going to be so great, they wouldn't have waited until that, you know, late in the draft to take him. And the Jets had already taken what they considered to be their quarterback of the future in the first round. But one of their scouts, Jesse Kay, who was responsible for the Midwest portion of the country, which obviously includes your alma mater, was vehemently trying to get Parcells to take Brady when the Jets pick came up at number 179 overall, and Bill basically said no.
He said no. Do you, did your source express why Parcells said no, or what his thinking might have been? Again, we could parse this out. People like Bill Walsh passed on Tom Brady back in the day. The Brady Six, that documentary, that superb piece of film that the folks at NFL Films have put together, documents the number of Hall of Fame football minds that whiffed on Tom Brady. That said, any idea why Parcells went in the direction of Tony Scott, the cornerback out of NC State? Well,
I mean, when I talked to Bill about this, he didn't recall the situation. I mentioned that in my column. And when I asked my source who was in the room, he goes, come on, it was 14 years ago. You know, it's hard to remember all the particulars. And it wasn't like it was, I'm just going to use an example. It wasn't like it was 1983 and the Jets passed on Dan Marino to take Ken O'Brien. You can remember all the arguments in the room for one or the other. You're talking about a 6th-round quarterback, despite the fact that he plays for the greatest institution in the country and the University of Michigan, that I don't think it was like a drag down beat, that whole thing that they had a conversation about. The scouts said Brady is going to be a very, very good player in this league, and the 6th round, I think we should take him, and we got nothing to lose. And Bill said, well, you know, I'm just kind of piecing this together that we already took somebody in the 1st round. We have Vinny Testaverde coming back from an Achilles injury, and had Pennington, and Ray Lucas was the number 3 quarterback on the team, and Bill brought him, with him from New England, and Bill loved Ray Lucas, so there wasn't a need to take Tom Brady. Rich, if everybody knew what Tom Brady was going to be, he would have been the first pick in the draft without question.
No, I understand that.
And this is at the end of the 3rd round. If people knew that. Bill Walsh wanted Phil Simms in the 79 draft, and he considered Joe Montana the consolation prize. And I know that because Walsh, told me that. And, it doesn't happen that often that you get a Hall of Famer and the, 2nd or 3rd best quarterback in NFL history in the 3rd round, and in the 6th round, rather. But it happened in this case. And, who knows what would have happened if Brady went to the Jets, if he ever would have become Tom Brady.
Well, and that's the point, too. That's the point, too, Gary, is, obviously the 199th selection overall is still a fire that stokes the engine in Tom Brady's system, right? And his belief system, his heart, his huge heart. It's also stoked by having to battle for the starting job at Michigan as well, and getting to Michigan from Northern California. All of that is obviously what is within Tom Brady's body that helped put him to the status that he has now. That said, environment also has something to do with it. That Belichick was here, Charlie Weiss was here. That plays into, I think, the undercurrent of your piece, which is the differences between these two organizations. That's what it essentially all comes down to. Gary, and that's what maybe could just stick it even further into the craw of a Jet fan reading your story. How would you agree with that assessment?
I think you're right on the money there. And, I can tell you this, and Rich, this is a little public service announcement here, and on a personal note, I'm doing a book that you're going to love. It's coming out next year.
Okay.
It's about the Brady-Manning rivalry and friendship. And in the course of my research is when I came up with this little nugget on the Jets Scout. But I have all kinds of great stuff in there about Brady and what he went through at Michigan, and how that drives him to this day. What Tom has told me, that every time he goes on the practice field, he feels he has to win his job, and that's how he approaches it. And that I've had players tell me how much of a pain he is on the practice field, because if somebody does something wrong, he gets in their face, because he never wants to waste a play. He never wants to give up any reps to his backup, because he feels he can get better with every snap that he takes, and any snap that a backup might take might be one step closer to him losing his job. And that all comes from what happened at Michigan. You're 100% right about that. For whatever reason, and I had a long talk with Lloyd Carr about what happened at Michigan, and it's all going to be in this book, which I hope people will really enjoy. But he didn't really establish himself as the unquestioned number one quarterback until there were about 6 games to go in his senior year. Up until that point, in his senior year, he played the first quarter, Drew Henson played the second quarter, and Lloyd Carr would decide at halftime, based on what he saw, who was playing the second half. And that went on for the first half of Brady's senior year, and then he finally turned it over to Brady. He played great, over the last stretch of the season, and he was lights out in the Orange Bowl against a really good Alabama team. And he still went in the 6th round because teams were concerned about why did it take this guy so long to establish himself at Michigan. And so he's carried that chip on his shoulder, right through today, his 15th year in the league. And, I knew after what happened in Kansas City a couple weeks ago, Rich, where people were saying Jimmy Garoppolo should start. Is this the beginning of the end of Brady and the winner? I knew he was going to play great the last 2 weeks, because I knew that he was going to take this so personally that he was going to look at it like he was a 6th-round pick all over again.
Well, Gary, too. I mean, Drew Henson was one of the most heralded prep stars, multi-sport prep stars in the history of the state of Michigan. And when he chose the University of Michigan, that had a lot to do with Lloyd Carr's thinking and getting him out there. And I was at a game in Syracuse with my soon, eventual future brother-in-law, who's coming to the stadium tonight, because that side of the family are all New Englanders, big-time New Englanders. He went to Syracuse. I remember I went to the Carrier Dome. I watched them rotate quarterbacks. But it was also, to me, the eye test. It was Brady was the clear better guy, and apparently that's how he got on the field here eventually. The eye test showed that he was the better quarterback than Drew Bledsoe, and it took Mo Lewis of the Jets to help bring that together, which, once again, Gary, I think it just stitches it all together, is how the Jets and the Patriots just have their DNA woven together with Belichick, and now, as you put it, with Brady in this mix, Parcells, Curtis Martin. It's remarkable how the DNA of these two franchises and this bitter rivalry are mixed together, Gary.
Absolutely. And, just from that standpoint, Rich, it's a shame, for the rivalry standpoint, that the Jets are 1-5, and they haven't been more competitive this year, because this is a tremendous rivalry, and it's been overtaken somewhat, I would say, on a national level by the Seahawks and the 49ers, because both those teams have been great the last couple of years. But this one has tremendous animosity, dating back to when, Parcells, basically snuck out of New England and worked his way to the Jets, and they had the arbitration hearing and all that stuff. And then Mike Tannenbaum constructed maybe one of the most brilliant offer sheets in the history of the NFL. That got Curtis Martin from the Patriots to the Jets. I mean, you can write a whole book about the Jets-Patriots rivalry, but in the bottom line to this whole thing, that since this started, and I'd say it started in 1997 when Parcells went to the Jets, the Patriots have been to 5 Super Bowls and won 3. The Jets have been to 3 AFC championship games and won none. So it's been an incredibly one-sided rivalry. And maybe the only thing the Jets have to hang their hat on is that They beat Brady and Belichick in the playoffs in Foxborough in the divisional rounds in 2010, which, if you look over the course of NFL history, of Jets history, Rich, that's probably the second greatest victory that the team has ever had, after Super Bowl III.
Oh my gosh! It just
they
that also
celebrated
just
that game like they actually won a Super Bowl.
Well, and
And
then
they
again,
didn't
that
show
just
up next week in
underscores, I guess, in
Pittsburgh.
many ways. Right. Well, it just again underscores the differences. That franchise can call that one of its biggest victories of all time, and they're here in a stadium tonight where there are multiple Super Bowl banners hung. Gary, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Again, that's in today's New York Daily News. Gary Myers joining me here.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern, on Audience.